My Indiana Makers, Bhutan 8th of November 2023, will not take a bite out of the Chinese poisoned bullet. India has to confront the powerful bully China since it has been coercing Bhutan, a peaceful country, into submission. Jigme Kesar Namgyel Wangchuk, the King of Bhutan, is in India for 8 days. On November 3 in Guwahati, he was formally received by Chief Minister of Assam Himanta Biswa Sarma. During his first part of a visit to India, King Jigme offered prayers at Maa Kamakhya Temple, engaged with the Bhutanese diaspora, and went on a jeep safari to the World Heritage Kaziranga National Park. Following his arrival in New Delhi, EAM Jaishankar paid a visit to King Jigme, and subsequently, he held formal delegation-level discussions with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. King Jigme is going to Maharashtra from New Delhi. India is on edge due to China's rapid boundary discussions with Bhutan, which could have geopolitical ramifications in the local neighborhood. At the same time, the rest of the world is preoccupied with developments in the Middle East. Bhutan and China inked a cooperation agreement on the roles and responsibilities of the Joint Technical Team, JTT, on boundary delimitation and demarcation on October 25, marking the end of the 25th round of border negotiations in Beijing. Vice Foreign Minister Sun Weidong, a former ambassador to India who paid a discreet visit to Bhutan in 2019 during his previous assignment, was met by the delegation from Bhutan led by Foreign Minister Tandi Dorji. Weidong met with Lotay Tshering, the Prime Minister of Bhutan, and expressed China's strong desire to deepen its cooperation with the country, particularly in the tourism sector. China's efforts to court Bhutan have been revitalized since the end of the 73-day Doklam stalemate, during which Bhutan publicly allied with India. Additionally, Dorji met Vice President Han Zheng of China, who emphasized the need to fast-track the process of demarcating borders while establishing diplomatic ties between the two nations. Additionally, he had discussions with Wang Yi, the foreign minister and member of the CCP's political bureau, who reaffirmed the need to restore diplomatic relations to further the interests of both nations. Dorji expressed Bhutan's willingness to resettle boundary disputes and support the One China policy. Except for Bhutan, China has crept into India's nearby neighborhood by fusing diplomatic ties with trade and economic collaboration. Except for Bhutan, every neighbor of India is a part of the BRI. Due to policy reasons, Bhutan has diplomatic relations with none of the permanent 5, including China. Bhutan has 4 consulates, 3 foreign embassies, Kuwait, Bangladesh, and India, and diplomatic ties with 54 of the 193 nations. The intense haste with which China resumed its involvement with Bhutan following an 8-year break smacked of coercive statecraft. Talks about borders were started by both nations in 1984. As of October 2021, Bhutan and China had conducted 10 expert group meetings, EGM, and 24 rounds of boundary talks. Following the 24th session of boundary negotiations, nations essentially agreed on the 3-step roadmap, TSR, which aims to speed up border negotiations. The recent talks are part of China's ongoing effort to strengthen its ties with Bhutan. China is courting Bhutan while keeping an eye on India. China's objectives to violate India's sovereignty date back to the 1962 war, which is still being worked on, with the dragon persistently attempting to keep India hot both inside and without. China became India's ardent enemy in recent years after inciting the Naxal movement fighting internal unrest and unrelenting, aggressive salami slicing along the borders. China is now targeting Bhutan instead of India after the Doklam incident. Beijing aggressively claimed the Soktang Wildlife Sanctuary in eastern Bhutan, which borders Arunachal Pradesh, in 2021 to scare Bhutan. However, Bhutan vehemently objected to Chinese attempts to register these claims formally. The sanctuary can only be reached through the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, which China cheekily refers to as southern Tibet and has lately included in the recently issued maps. This is the basis for China's infamous claims to Songtang. Refusing to bow to Chinese coercion and its attempts to shift the objectives, Bhutan demanded during EGMs that all mention of Songtang and Jigme 1 be removed, according to insider information obtained by Strat News Global, before formal negotiations. Bhutan further insisted that Batongla, rather than Jigme, downstream of the Doklam Tri-junction, be the starting point for the boundary demarcation. China, skilled at using carrot-and-stick diplomacy, has had to modify its strategy toward Thimphu due to Bhutan's reluctance to alter its position on boundary disputes. According to the 1949 Friendship Treaty, which states that Bhutan has undertaken to be guided by the advice of Government of India in regard to its external relations, India and Bhutan have a special connection and are bound by treaties. The two nations express commitment to cooperate closely with each other on the issues relating to the national interests is even included in the updated 2007 treaty. Bhutan and Indian territorial concerns are closely related. The Siliguri corridor, often known as the Chicken's Neck and connecting mainland India to the northeast area, is quite close to the Doklam Tri-junction. China has been encroaching on Bhutan's land for a long time. In 2017, China attempted to strangle the strategically vital Siliguri corridor by building roads and military facilities close to Doklam. Even though India has blocked Chinese attempts, China has been expanding on Bhutan's western sector and regions in the north to increase pressure on Bhutan. The latest satellite photographs showed the existence of a permanent Chinese military installation near Doklam, despite Bhutan's official denial of Chinese incursion. China offered to exchange 269 square kilometers in the Doklam sector for 495 square kilometers in the north in exchange for control of Bhutan's western region. Taking into account India's geopolitical objectives, Bhutan has declined the idea. Following the acquisition of Tibet, China first claimed 9 areas of territory in Bhutan. Beijing has now reduced it to just 2 industries. The ongoing boundary negotiations are accelerating the delineation of boundaries between these two sectors. Bhutan's Prime Minister, Lotay Tshering, said in a March interview with the Belgian news agency Le Libre, Doklam is a junction point between India, China, and Bhutan. Bhutan is not the only country that needs to find a solution. It is a trio. 3 equal countries make up a third, there is no such thing as a big or little country. This suggested that although China and Bhutan could move more quickly to draw boundaries in other areas, Bhutan, obligated by treaty to uphold Indian interests, would not engage in talks over the western region. Even if China's media apparatus bemoans how India tries to interfere in and take control of Bhutan, Thimphu has consistently kept New Delhi informed about the boundary negotiations. It makes sense that King Jigme, who is visiting India for the second time this year, has updated New Delhi on the status of the boundary negotiations with China. Following Prime Minister Tschering's interview and the 11th expert group meeting between China and Bhutan in Kunming, King Jigme traveled to India in April. Presumptively calm border talks between China and Bhutan are taking place at a time when the West is criticizing Beijing for its bluster, multiple incidents of collisions with Philippine vessels in the South China Sea, and multiple aerial interceptions with American and Canadian aircraft. China is trying to tighten the noose around India and scare Taiwan while the Israel-Hamas war and the Ukraine conflict dominate the global strategic conversation. China's engagement with Bhutan is, unfortunately, mistimed. The people of Bhutan, who had previously grumbled about their country's excessive reliance on India, are haughty about Thimphu's choice to give India top priority, particularly in light of the world's declining interest in Chinese efforts and the withdrawal of Italy and the Philippines from the Belt and Road Initiative. unique ties of friendship and cooperation with Bhutan, and reiterated continued and full support to the socio-economic development in Bhutan based on the priorities of the royal government and as per the vision of His Majesty were the pledges Modi made to Bhutan during the bilateral meetings. Enjoying long-standing exceptional bilateral relations characterized by utmost trust, goodwill and mutual understanding at all levels, India and Bhutan are expanding their fields of collaboration in line with this ethos. Trade, technology, health, environmental preservation, cross-border connectivity, reciprocal investments, and interpersonal relationships are a few of these. One of the fundamental tenets of the India-Bhutan economic collaboration is hydropower cooperation. Countries are increasingly expanding hydro cooperation to non-hydro renewables, including solar and green e-mobility projects, signaling the start of a new age in energy cooperation. Countries have decided to modernize the facilities at the current integrated checkpoints, ICPs, and designate 2 new checkpoints, Kaziranga, Assam, and Samdrup Jangkar, Bhutan, as ICPs, in keeping with King Jigme's goal of turning Jellafu into an intelligent city. ICPs enable smooth entrance and exit and promote trade and tourism. Concurrently, nations are hastening discussions over the plan for rail connectivity between Banarhat, West Bengal, and Samd, Bhutan, and cross-border connectivity between Kokrajhar in Assam and Jellafu in Bhutan. India is considering Bhutan's request for concessional funding for capacity building and skill development. The Haldibari, West Bengal, New Delhi has cleared the Guwahati, Bangladesh, train link for Bhutanese commerce with Bangladesh. Nowadays, it's clear that startups, space exploration, and STEM education are important areas for new collaborations. India is boosting the funding under the Ambassador's Scholarship Program for students from Bhutan, which would strengthen this partnership. India has now made more places for Bhutanese students to attend Assam medical institutes and receive top-notch instruction and training too. King Jigme hailed India for providing developmental support for Bhutan's 12th five-year plan and praised India's G20 summit for putting the interests of the Global South first. India reaffirmed her intention to provide Bhutan's 13th five-year plan with increased support. India differs from China because it values interdependence and is not influenced by cronyism or reckless debt-trap diplomacy. Little nations bordering India are increasingly grateful for New Delhi's assistance with crucial socio-economic growth. In contrast to India, which has a partnership focused on progress and mutual benefit, China has tried to dominate other nations by deceit, violence, duplicity, and betrayal. Beijing's unrestricted ability to neutralize India has been challenged by Bhutan's unwillingness to jeopardize Indian interests. China is making a great effort to court Bhutan to open an embassy and forge diplomatic relations. Beijing is seeking wiggle room to cut Bhutan's diplomatic ties with India. Even if China keeps negotiating a border with Bhutan, establishing diplomatic ties is contingent upon the boundary being resolved. It is always challenging to break through the Thimphu barrier because of China's propensity to maintain heated borders and India's instability.